The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Meadowbrook Park, the golden light filtering through the trees as children's laughter filled the air. Marcus Bennett watched his 7-year-old daughter Zoe climb the jungle gym, her braids bouncing with each determined movement, her face scrunched in concentration. These moments were precious to him, stolen hours between his shifts at the hospital where he worked as a pediatric surgeon. It had been just the two of them since Alyssa passed away 3 years ago, and he'd structured his entire life around being there for Zoe. "Daddy, watch this," Zoe called out, balancing at the top of the climbing frame, her arms spread wide like wings. Marcus smiled, raising his phone to capture the moment. "I see you, baby girl. You're amazing." He kept his eyes fixed on his daughter, oblivious to the woman sitting on a nearby bench. Karen Whitfield had been watching them for the past 20 minutes, her gaze narrowing with each passing moment. She clutched her designer purse closer to her chest, her manicured nails tapping anxiously against the leather. Something didn't feel right to her. The man seemed too interested in the children, constantly taking pictures. And that little girl, was she really his? They looked nothing alike. Karen's mind raced with possibilities, each more sinister than the last. What if this was a kidnapping? What if that poor child was in danger? She'd seen a segment on her local news just last week about child trafficking. This could be happening right in front of her. Wasn't it better to be safe than sorry? She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Emergency services, what's your situation?" "Yes, hello," Karen hissed into the phone, turning away slightly. "I'm at Meadowbrook Park, and there's a suspicious man taking pictures of children. He has a little girl with him who seems uncomfortable. I think she might be in danger." "Can you describe the man, ma'am?" "He's tall, black, wearing a gray hoodie. He's been here for at least 20 minutes just watching the playground and taking pictures." Karen glanced over her shoulder. "Please hurry, I'm worried about the children." Marcus was completely unaware of the storm brewing as he helped Zoe down from the jungle gym. "Ready for some ice cream, Zozo?" Zoe nodded enthusiastically, her eyes lighting up. "Chocolate with rainbow sprinkles? Is there any other kind?" Marcus laughed, taking her small hand in his. They had walked barely 10 steps when the sound of sirens cut through the peaceful afternoon. 2 police cruisers pulled up to the park entrance, their lights flashing. Marcus tensed instinctively, a reaction born from years of experience. "Hold my hand tight, Zoe," he said quietly, his tone shifting just enough that Zoe picked up on the change. She moved closer to him, her earlier excitement fading. 2 officers emerged from the first car, hands resting near their holsters as they scanned the park. Their gazes landed on Marcus, and they began walking purposefully in his direction. From the second car, a 3rd officer approached, his movements more measured. "Sir, we need to speak with you," the first officer called out, his voice carrying across the playground. Other parents turned to look, conversations halting mid-sentence. Marcus took a deep breath. "Of course, officers. Is something wrong?" He kept his voice steady, conscious of Zoe's grip tightening around his fingers. "We received a call about suspicious activity in the park," the second officer said, eyes darting between Marcus and Zoe. "Someone taking photos of children." Confusion washed over Marcus's face. "I was just taking pictures of my daughter." He nodded toward Zoe, who was now pressing herself against his leg. Her earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. The 3rd officer, slightly older than his colleagues, stepped forward. His nameplate read Reynolds. "Sir, would you mind showing us the photos on your phone?" Marcus hesitated, not out of guilt, but principle. He was acutely aware of the eyes watching them, of the whispers starting to spread. He was also aware of how quickly situations like this could escalate. "Daddy?" Zoe's voice was small, confused. Marcus squeezed her hand reassuringly before addressing the officers. I understand you're doing your job, but I was simply taking pictures of my daughter playing. I'm not comfortable handing over my personal phone without some explanation of why I'm being singled out." Officer Reynolds' expression remained neutral. "Sir, we're responding to a report from a concerned citizen. Your cooperation would help clear this up quickly." Karen watched from her bench, a mixture of validation and unease swirling in her stomach. She'd done the right thing, hadn't she? Better safe than sorry. Marcus crouched down to Zoe's level. "Baby, I need to talk to these officers for a minute. Everything's okay, all right?" Zoe nodded, though her eyes were wide with worry. Marcus straightened up and reluctantly handed his unlocked phone to Officer Reynolds, who began scrolling through the recent photos. "That's my daughter climbing the jungle gym," Marcus explained, his voice tight. "You can see the timestamps. We've been here less than an hour." Reynolds nodded slowly as he swiped through the images, all clearly showing Zoe at various points around the playground, her smile bright in each one. "And you are her father," Marcus finished firmly. "I'm her father." The first officer, younger and clearly more on edge, continued pressing. "Do you have any identification, proof of relation?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I have my driver's license, but I don't typically carry my daughter's birth certificate to the park." Reynolds handed the phone back to Marcus. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience, but we need to verify." "Daddy didn't do anything wrong!" Zoe suddenly burst out, her voice carrying across the now silent playground. "Why are you being mean to my daddy?" The rawness of her question hung in the air, cutting through the tension. Reynolds looked at the little girl, then back at Marcus, something shifting in his expression. "The person who called was concerned about the child's welfare," he explained more gently. "We have to follow up on all reports involving children." Marcus fought to keep his voice level. "I understand that, officer, but I hope you also understand how this feels from my perspective. I took my daughter to the park after a 12-hour shift at Mercy Hospital, where I'm a pediatric surgeon, by the way. And now I'm being treated like a criminal for taking pictures of my own child." Reynolds' radio crackled and he stepped aside to respond. When he returned, his demeanor had softened further. "Dr. Bennett, we've confirmed your identity. I apologize for the disruption to your day." The use of his title and the swift verification weren't lost on Marcus or on the watching crowd. The other two officers stepped back, their postures relaxing. But the damage was already done. Parents were gathering their children, throwing glances in their direction. The joyful atmosphere of moments ago had evaporated. Karen remained on her bench, her initial certainty crumbling as she watched the officers back away. The man wasn't just any man, he was a doctor. The little girl wasn't uncomfortable. She was defending her father. Karen's stomach twisted with the first pangs of doubt. "Thank you, officers," Marcus said, his voice controlled despite the anger and humiliation coursing through him. "Are we free to go now?" "Yes, of course," Reynolds replied. "Again, we apologize for the misunderstanding." As the officers retreated to their vehicles, Marcus knelt down in front of Zoe, whose eyes were brimming with tears. "Hey, Zozo, it's okay now. The officers were just doing their job." "Why did they think you did something bad?" Zoe asked, her lower lip trembling. Marcus struggled to find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old. "Sometimes people make assumptions based on what they see, not who someone really is. But you were so brave standing up for me like that." Zoe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Can we still get ice cream?" Marcus managed to smile, though his heart was heavy. "Absolutely. Double scoops today." As they turned to leave, Marcus noticed Karen still sitting on her bench, her face now flushed with what might have been shame. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, he knew. She was the one who had called the police. The realization sent a fresh wave of anger through him, but he tamped it down. Not here, not in front of Zoe. But as they walked past her, Zoe suddenly stopped. "It was you, wasn't it?" she asked Karen, her voice small but steady. "You thought my daddy was bad." Karen flinched as if struck. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally managed to stammer. "I was just concerned about—" "My daddy saves kids at the hospital," Zoe interrupted, her chin raised proudly. "He's a good person. You shouldn't judge people by how they look." The simplicity and truth of the child's rebuke left Karen speechless. Other parents who had lingered nearby exchanged glances, the whispers taking on a different tone now. Marcus gently guided Zoe away. "Come on, sweetie. That ice cream is waiting." They were nearly at the park exit when a voice called out behind them. "Dr. Bennett, wait, please." Marcus turned to see Officer Reynolds approaching, this time without his colleagues. The officer's face was solemn as he stopped a respectful distance away. "Dr. Bennett, I wanted to speak with you privately," Reynolds said, his voice low. "What happened today wasn't right, and I want you to know I recognize that." Marcus studied the officer's face, searching for sincerity. "My daughter and I were just trying to enjoy an afternoon at the park, Officer Reynolds." Reynolds nodded, glancing briefly at Zoe, who was watching him warily. "I know, and I'm truly sorry for how this played out. Unfortunately, it's not the first time I've seen a call like this," he hesitated. "But I want you to know that not every officer would have handled it the same way my colleagues did. We have work to do." The acknowledgement, unexpected as it was, took some of the edge off Marcus's anger. "Yes, we do," he agreed quietly. "If you ever want to file a complaint," Reynolds began. "Would it make a difference?" Marcus asked, the question hanging between them. Reynolds met his gaze steadily. "It might not change what happened today, but it could help change what happens tomorrow." With that, the officer handed Marcus a card with his direct number written on the back, nodded respectfully, and walked away. Marcus pocketed the card, his mind already racing with thoughts about what tomorrow might bring, about the conversation he would need to have with Zoe that night, about the world his daughter was growing up in. But for now, there was ice cream to be had, and a smile to restore to his daughter's face. What he couldn't have known then was that the incident at the park would spark something much bigger than a complaint, something that would change not just his life but the lives of many others in ways he never could have imagined. The video appeared on social media that evening, shaky footage captured by a parent at the playground, showing the confrontation between Marcus and the police officers. By morning, it had been viewed over 300,000 times. The caption read simply, "Black doctor questioned by police while taking pictures of his own daughter at Meadowbrook Park. Everyday racism." Marcus first learned about the viral spread when his phone began buzzing incessantly during his morning rounds at Mercy Hospital. Text messages from friends and colleagues flooded in, asking if he was okay, expressing outrage, sharing links to the video. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. He'd hoped to put yesterday behind them, to shield Zoe from any further fallout. "Dr. Bennett?" A nurse approached cautiously, clipboard in hand. "There are several reporters in the lobby asking to speak with you." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "Please tell them I have no comment at this time. I'm focused on my patients." "Of course," she replied, hesitating before adding, "The video, it's everywhere. Everyone in the hospital is talking about it." "Great," Marcus muttered, turning back to his patient charts. He didn't want this attention. He didn't want to be another hashtag, another viral moment of injustice. All he wanted was to do his job, raise his daughter, and live his life without having to explain or justify his existence. By lunchtime, the hospital administration had called him into a meeting. The chief of surgery, Dr. Eleanor Winters, a stern woman with salt and pepper hair pulled into a tight bun, sat behind her desk with a grave expression. "Marcus, I want you to know that Mercy Hospital stands behind you completely," she began, her voice firm but sympathetic. "What happened at that park was unacceptable." "Thank you, Eleanor," Marcus replied, his posture rigid. "But I'd rather not make this a bigger issue than it already is." "I'm afraid it's beyond that now," Eleanor said, sliding a tablet across the desk to him. On the screen was a news article with the headline, "Prominent Black Pediatric Surgeon Profiled While with Daughter. Community Demands Accountability." Marcus skimmed the article, his heart sinking. There were quotes from witnesses at the park, statements from civil rights organizations, and demands for an investigation into the police response. At the end was a quote from an anonymous source claiming this wasn't the first racially motivated call made by the woman on the bench. "The hospital's public relations team is getting flooded with calls," Eleanor continued. "News vans are parked outside. The mayor's office has reached out. This isn't going away, Marcus." "I didn't ask for any of this," he said quietly. "I know." Eleanor's expression softened. "But sometimes we don't choose our battles. They choose us." Marcus left the meeting feeling more exhausted than after a double shift in surgery. As he walked through the hospital corridors, he noticed the sidelong glances, the whispered conversations that halted when he approached. He was no longer just Dr. Bennett, the talented surgeon who had saved countless children. Now he was Dr. Bennett, the black doctor from that video. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, Zoe's babysitter. "News people came to your house, didn't answer door. Zoe's fine, watching cartoons." Marcus typed back a quick thank you, his concern mounting. They were going to his home now, where his daughter was. The thought made his blood boil. He ducked into an empty consultation room and dialed Officer Reynolds' number from the card he'd been given. "Reynolds," came the gruff answer. "Officer Reynolds, this is Marcus Bennett from yesterday at the park." There was a brief pause. "Dr. Bennett, I've been expecting your call, though I figured it might be from a lawyer." "Not yet," Marcus replied, "but I'm calling because reporters have shown up at my house. My 7-year-old daughter is there with her babysitter." Reynolds' tone changed immediately. "That's not acceptable. I'll send a patrol car to keep an eye on your property and make sure they stay off your lawn. You might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days until this dies down." "And when will that be?" Marcus asked, frustration evident in his voice. "Hard to say," Reynolds admitted. "The video's gone viral, the department's under pressure, and—" He hesitated. "And what?" "The woman who made the call, she's been identified on social media, Karen Whitfield. She's the wife of City Councilman Richard Whitfield." Marcus closed his eyes, understanding the implications immediately. A prominent local politician's wife racially profiling a black doctor wasn't just a local story anymore. It had all the ingredients for a national headline. "There's something else you should know," Reynolds continued. "This isn't the first complaint involving Mrs. Whitfield. There have been 3 other incidents in the past year where she's called the police on people of color in the neighborhood for suspicious activity. None resulted in arrests or citations." "Why am I not surprised?" Marcus muttered. "The department buried the pattern," Reynolds admitted, his voice lower. "Councilman Whitfield has influence with the chief, but with this video going viral, it's all coming out now." After ending the call, Marcus stood by the window, watching the world continue its normal rhythm below. People coming and going, ambulances arriving, life moving forward. Yet here he was, suddenly thrust into a spotlight he never wanted, at the center of a controversy that was bigger than just one afternoon at the park. His pager beeped, pulling him back to his duties. A 7-year-old boy with appendicitis needed emergency surgery. Despite everything swirling around him, This was something Marcus could focus on, something he could control. In the operating room, he was just a surgeon, and for the next hour, that was all that mattered. When Marcus finished the successful surgery, he found Dr. Winters waiting for him outside the operating room. "The hospital board has convened an emergency meeting," she informed him. "They'd like you to attend." "Eleanor, I just finished surgery. I need to check on my daughter." "Marcus," she interrupted, her expression grave. "Councilman Whitfield is there, and he's brought his wife." The hospital's boardroom was tense when Marcus entered, conversations hushing as all eyes turned to him. At the far end of the long table sat Richard Whitfield, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, his face a mask of practiced neutrality. Beside him, Karen Whitfield looked considerably less composed, her fingers nervously twisting a tissue. The hospital board chairman, Dr. Harold Rosen, cleared his throat. "Dr. Bennett, thank you for joining us. We've been discussing yesterday's unfortunate incident and its impact on the hospital." Marcus took a seat, acutely aware of the dynamics at play. "I wasn't aware that a private citizen's trip to the park with his daughter was hospital business." "It becomes our business when one of our top surgeons is at the center of a viral controversy," Rosen replied carefully. "Councilman Whitfield has requested this meeting to discuss a resolution." Richard Whitfield leaned forward. "Dr. Bennett, first let me say that what happened yesterday was regrettable. My wife acted out of concern for a child's welfare, but clearly there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Marcus repeated, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. "Is that what we're calling it?" Karen Whitfield spoke up, her voice quavering. "I never meant for... I was just trying to protect..." She stopped, composing herself. "I'm not racist. I would have called about anyone behaving suspiciously around children." Marcus looked at her directly. "Was I behaving suspiciously, Mrs. Whitfield? Or did I just look suspicious to you?" The room fell silent. Dr. Rosen cleared his throat again. "We were hoping to find a way to put this incident behind us. The hospital's reputation..." "The hospital's reputation?" Marcus interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "What about my reputation? What about the example this sets for my daughter? What about the next person Mrs. Whitfield decides looks suspicious?" Richard Whitfield's political smile faltered. "Dr. Bennett, we're prepared to issue a joint statement. My wife will apologize for the misunderstanding. The hospital will affirm its commitment to diversity, and we can all move forward from this unfortunate incident." Marcus looked around the table at the board members, most of whom couldn't meet his eyes. They wanted this to go away quietly, to protect the hospital's donors and relationships, to avoid rocking the boat. "And what happens the next time?" Marcus asked softly. "What happens to the next person who doesn't have the protection of being a doctor at a prestigious hospital? What happens to the delivery driver or the gardener or the teenager Mrs. Whitfield finds suspicious?" Karen Whitfield flushed. "That's not fair. I made a mistake. I'm trying to apologize." "Are you?" Marcus challenged. "Because all I'm hearing is damage control." Dr. Winters, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "Marcus is right. This isn't just about one incident or one apology. This is about acknowledging a pattern and making real changes." She turned to the Whitfields. "Your wife has made multiple calls to police about suspicious individuals in the past year, all of whom were people of color. That's not a coincidence, and it's not a simple misunderstanding." Richard Whitfield's expression hardened. "I didn't come here to have my wife vilified. We're offering a reasonable solution." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You're offering a Band-Aid for a bullet wound." He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "I won't be part of a PR exercise that changes nothing. If you want my cooperation, here's what I need: a community program funded by the city and the hospital to address racial profiling, implicit bias training for both police and hospital staff, and a citizens' oversight committee for police calls like the one made against me. The councilman scoffed. That's completely unreasonable. Is it? Marcus challenged. Because the alternative is that I speak to all those reporters outside, share the pattern of calls Mrs. Whitfield has made, and let the public decide if your wife's actions were a misunderstanding or something more systemic. The threat hung in the air, creating a palpable tension. Dr. Rosen looked nervously between Marcus and the councilman. This isn't necessary, Richard Whitfield said, his politician's veneer cracking to reveal anger beneath. You're making a mistake, Doctor. No, Marcus replied calmly. The mistake was thinking I would quietly accept an apology while nothing changes. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. You have until tomorrow to decide. After that, I'll tell my story my way. As Marcus walked out of the boardroom, Dr. Winters hurried after him. Marcus, wait. What you're asking for, the board might not back you on this. He stopped, turning to face her. Then I'll find another hospital that will, but I won't be silent, Eleanor. Not anymore. Not when my daughter is watching. With that, he walked away, his phone already buzzing with another call. The name on the screen made him pause. Ayanna Washington, civil rights attorney. Someone he hadn't spoken to since law school before he chose medicine over law. He answered, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Ayanna, he said, I was just about to call you. You haven't changed a bit, Marcus, Ayanna Washington said, settling into a chair across from him at the small cafe 3 blocks from the hospital. They had chosen this location for its privacy, a quiet place where they wouldn't be interrupted by reporters or curious onlookers. Neither have you, Marcus replied with a tired smile, still fighting the good fight. Ayanna's dark eyes sparkled with the same intensity he remembered from their law school days. Her hair was different now, styled in elegant locks rather than the close-cropped cut she'd worn back then, but her presence was just as commanding. When I saw that video, she said, shaking her head, I knew I had to reach out. It's been what, 12 years? And here you are, saving children as a surgeon instead of saving communities as a lawyer like we talked about. Marcus shrugged. Different path, same goal. And now those paths are crossing again. Ayanna placed a tablet on the table, opening to a document. The video has over 3 million views now. Every major news outlet is covering it. Dr. While Black is trending. This isn't just a local incident anymore, Marcus. I never wanted to be the face of anything, he said quietly. Few do, she replied. But sometimes the moment chooses you. Ayanna leaned forward. Reynolds called me too. He sent over Mrs. Whitfield's history of calls. It's a pattern, Marcus. A clear, documented pattern of racial profiling by someone with connections to power. We can use this. Use it for what? Marcus questioned, stirring his untouched coffee. I just want to get back to my life, take care of my patients, raise my daughter without her having to see her father being treated like a criminal. Ayanna's expression softened. How is Zoe handling all this? Marcus exhaled slowly. She's confused, angry. She keeps asking why that lady thought I was a bad person. How do you explain racial profiling to a 7-year-old? You don't, Ayanna said simply. You show her how to respond to it. You show her that her father stands up not just for himself, but for everyone who doesn't have the privilege of being Dr. Marcus Bennett when the police show up. Marcus was quiet for a moment, contemplating her words. The hospital board wants me to accept an apology and move on. Whitfield and his wife offered a joint statement, a PR band-aid. And what did you say? I told them I wanted real change. Community programs, bias training, oversight committees. Whitfield called it unreasonable. Ayanna smiled, a slow, knowing smile that suggested she'd expected nothing less. Of course he did. They want this to go away quietly. We don't. We? Marcus raised an eyebrow. I have a coalition of civil rights organizations ready to back you. Community leaders willing to speak out. And most importantly, she paused, pulling out another document. I have 3 other complaints against Karen Whitfield that never saw the light of day because of her husband's influence. 1 from a delivery driver, 1 from a landscape worker at the park, and 1 from a teenager who was just waiting for a bus. Marcus took the papers, scanning them quickly. The similarities were striking. All people of color, all subjected to police questioning because one woman found their presence suspicious. No one was ever charged, Ayanna continued. No arrests were made, just harassment, humiliation, and the message that they didn't belong in that neighborhood. Until now, no one had the platform to make it stop. And you think I do? I know you do. Ayanna's voice was firm. You're a respected doctor, a widowed father raising his daughter alone. You've saved countless children. They can't paint you as a threat, no matter how hard they try. Marcus thought about Zoe, about the look on her face when she realized what was happening at the park. He thought about the 3 other people in these complaints who didn't have his advantages, his title, his resources. What's your plan? He finally asked. Ayanna's smile widened. First, we decline their offer and hold a press conference. Then we file a civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice. And then, she tapped the tablet, we use that as leverage to get exactly what you asked for, real, meaningful change. As they continued discussing strategy, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Doctor, Bennett, there's a woman at your door, says she's the one from the park and wants to speak to you privately. No cameras or anything. What should I do? Marcus stared at the message in disbelief. Karen Whitfield is at my house. Ayanna's eyes widened. Without her husband? Interesting. What are you going to do? I don't know, Marcus admitted. Part of me wants to tell Mrs. Rodriguez to send her away. And the other part? Marcus thought for a moment. Wants to hear what she has to say when her husband isn't around. Be careful, Ayanna warned. This could be a trap. She could be wearing a wire, looking for something to use against you. Or she could genuinely want to apologize, Marcus countered. I have to at least consider that possibility. Ayanna looked skeptical, but nodded. Your call, but I'm coming with you. 30 minutes later, they pulled up to Marcus's modest 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood. The news vans that had been there earlier were gone, likely chasing the next breaking story, but a police cruiser was parked discreetly across the street. Officer Reynolds making good on his promise. Karen Whitfield sat on the front porch steps, alone, looking nothing like the confident woman from the park. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a simple blouse and slacks, her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. When she saw Marcus approaching, she stood quickly, nervously smoothing her clothes. Dr. Bennett, she began, her voice quavering slightly. Thank you for... She stopped when she noticed Ayanna. I was hoping to speak with you privately. Whatever you have to say to me, you can say in front of my attorney, Marcus replied, his tone neutral but firm. Karen's eyes darted between them. I understand. I came to apologize, properly. Not the statement Richard wanted me to give, but a real apology. Marcus studied her face, looking for sincerity or deception. Let's go inside, he finally said, unlocking the door. Mrs. Rodriguez met them in the entryway, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Zoe's upstairs playing, she informed Marcus quietly. She doesn't know about the visitor. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. We'll be in the living room if she needs me. Once they were seated, Karen perched uncomfortably on the edge of the sofa while Marcus and Ayanna took the chairs opposite her. The tension in the room was palpable. "I want to start by saying I'm truly sorry," Karen began, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What I did was wrong. I jumped to conclusions based on—" She faltered. "Based on what, Mrs. Whitfield?" Marcus prompted. "Based on prejudices I didn't even realize I had," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I saw you taking pictures, I immediately assumed the worst. I didn't see a father with his daughter. I saw—" She trailed off, unable to finish. "You saw a threat," Marcus completed for her. "Because of the color of my skin." Karen flinched but nodded. "Yes, and there's no excuse for that. None at all." Ayanna leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitfield, are you aware that you've made similar calls about other people of color in your neighborhood?" Karen's eyes widened slightly. Yes. And I'm ashamed of that too. I never thought of myself as racist. I still don't want to believe that about myself. But when I saw that video, when I heard what your daughter said to me—" She looked directly at Marcus. "Out of the mouths of babes, right? You shouldn't judge people by how they look. She was right, and I was wrong." Marcus remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "Richard wanted me to do damage control, to say it was all a misunderstanding and move on, but it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was wrong." Karen took a deep breath. "That's why I'm here without him knowing. I want to make this right, not just sweep it under the rug." "What exactly are you proposing?" Ayanna asked, her tone professionally skeptical. "I want to support the changes Dr. Bennett asked for at the hospital. All of them. I want to use what influence I have to make sure they happen." Karen straightened her shoulders. "And I want to publicly acknowledge what I did and its consequences. No PR spin, no excuses." Marcus exchanged a glance with Ayanna, both clearly surprised by the offer. "Why?" Marcus asked simply. "Why risk your husband's political career? Why come here without his knowledge?" Karen was quiet for a moment. "Because some things are more important than politics. Because I have to live with myself. And because—" She hesitated, then continued more softly. "Because I have a 14-year-old daughter who saw that video too. The look on her face when she realized that was me, the disappointment, the shame, I never want to see that again." Before either Marcus or Ayanna could respond, the sound of small footsteps on the stairs announced Zoe's presence. She appeared in the doorway, still in her school clothes, her curious eyes taking in the scene. "Daddy?" she said hesitantly, immediately recognizing Karen. "That's the lady from the park." Karen tensed visibly, clearly unprepared for this confrontation. Marcus held out his hand and Zoe came to his side. "Yes, sweetie. Mrs. Whitfield came to talk to us." Zoe looked at Karen with the direct, unfiltered gaze only children possess. "Are you still mad at my daddy?" Karen shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, sweetie. I was never mad at your daddy. I made a big mistake, and I came to say I'm sorry." Zoe considered this for a moment. "My teacher says when you make a mistake, you have to fix it and then do better next time." A tear slipped down Karen's cheek. "Your teacher is very smart. That's exactly what I'm trying to do." The simple wisdom of the child's perspective seemed to cut through the tension in the room. Marcus pulled Zoe onto his lap, kissing the top of her head. "Why don't you go back upstairs with Mrs. Rodriguez for a little while longer? We're almost done here." After Zoe left, Karen wiped her eyes. "She's remarkable." "Yes, she is," Marcus agreed. "And everything I do, every decision I make, is about making sure she grows up in a world that sees her value and doesn't judge her by her skin color." Karen nodded solemnly. "I understand." and I want to help make that world for her, and for my daughter too. Ayanna, who had been observing carefully, finally spoke. Your support could make a difference, Mrs. Whitfield, but we need more than words. We need action. Tell me what to do, Karen said simply. The conversation continued for another hour, outlining specifics, making plans, negotiating terms. By the time Karen left, a tentative alliance had formed, fragile but real. As Marcus and Ayanna watched Karen drive away, Ayanna shook her head in wonderment. I did not see that coming. Neither did I, Marcus admitted. Do you think she's sincere? I think she's trying to be, Ayanna replied carefully. Whether she follows through is another matter entirely. And her husband? He's not going to be happy about this. Ayanna's expression turned grim. No, he's not. In fact, I expect Councilman Whitfield to fight back, hard. This is just the beginning, Marcus. As if on cue, Marcus's phone rang. The hospital's number flashed on the screen. Dr. Bennett, he answered, his voice professional. Dr. Winter's voice came through, tight with tension. Marcus, I need you to come in immediately. The board has voted. They're asking for your resignation. Marcus felt a cold wave of shock. On what grounds? Unprofessional conduct, bringing negative attention to the hospital. She lowered her voice. It's Whitfield. He's called in favors with half the board members. I fought it, but I was outvoted. As Marcus hung up, Ayanna watched his face. What is it? They want me to resign, he said, the reality still sinking in. Whitfield moved faster than we expected. Ayanna's eyes flashed with determination. Then we move faster too. Karen Whitfield just became our star witness. Marcus looked back at his house, thinking of Zoe upstairs, unaware that her father's career was suddenly in jeopardy. I've spent years building my practice, my reputation. They can't just take that away. They're trying, Ayanna said grimly, but they've made a critical mistake. What's that? They've given us our battlefield. Ayanna picked up her phone. Time to rally the troops, Marcus. This isn't just about a park incident anymore. This is about systematic retaliation against someone who dared to speak up. As she began making calls, Marcus realized that the quiet life he'd tried to build for himself and Zoe had irrevocably changed. There would be no going back, only forward, into a fight he never wanted, but now couldn't avoid. The hospital boardroom felt more like a courtroom as Marcus sat alone at one end of the long table. Across from him, the board members avoided eye contact, fidgeting with papers or staring at their tablets. Only Dr. Winters met his gaze directly, her expression a mix of anger and apology. Dr. Bennett, Board Chairman Rosen began, clearing his throat uncomfortably. I hope you understand this isn't personal. The hospital must consider its reputation, its donors, its... Let's not insult Dr. Bennett's intelligence, Dr. Winters interrupted sharply. This is entirely personal, and we all know it. Councilman Whitfield made calls, and suddenly the board wants to terminate one of our most talented surgeons. Rosen's face reddened. Eleanor, we've already voted. You voted to ask for his resignation, she corrected, but Dr. Bennett hasn't given it, and I suggest he doesn't. All eyes turned to Marcus, who sat with perfect posture, his expression unreadable. He'd spent the night talking strategy with Ayanna, weighing options and preparing for this moment. I will not be resigning, Marcus stated calmly. Not today, not tomorrow, not over this. Rosen's expression hardened. Then we'll have to consider termination proceedings. On what grounds? Marcus challenged. My patient outcomes are exemplary. My research is published in top medical journals. My department runs efficiently and profitably. So please enlighten me as to the professional reasons you'd fire me. The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. If you terminate me without cause, Marcus continued, I'll file a wrongful termination lawsuit. And given the timing and circumstances, we all know how that will look. Are you threatening this institution? One of the board members asked incredulously. I'm stating facts, Marcus replied evenly. I've dedicated my career to this hospital. I've saved countless children on your operating tables. I've brought in millions in research grants. And now you want to discard me because I had the audacity to be black in public and then speak up about it. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the room. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. We could place you on administrative leave while things cool down, Rosen suggested, his tone conciliatory now. Paid leave, of course. Marcus shook his head. My patients need me. I have 3 surgeries scheduled this week alone. Dr. Winters leaned forward. The medical staff will stand behind Dr. Bennett. You start pushing him out and you'll have resignations from half the department heads by sunset. This was clearly news to Rosen, whose eyes widened slightly. Is that a fact? I spent all night on the phone, Winters confirmed with a grim smile. The nurses' union is ready to make a statement too. You move against Marcus, and this hospital will face an internal revolt on top of the public relations nightmare. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward his colleague but kept his expression neutral. This support hadn't been part of the strategy he discussed with Ayanna, but it was a welcome development. Furthermore, Marcus added, reaching into his briefcase, I've brought copies of something you should all see. He distributed a document to each board member. This is a petition signed by over 200 of my patients' families, expressing their support and their desire for me to continue as their children's surgeon. The board members flipped through the pages, their expressions shifting from surprise to concern. The petition had been Ayanna's idea, a rapid mobilization of the families Marcus had helped over the years, many of whom had already been reaching out to offer support after seeing the viral video. When did you have time to organize this? Rosen asked, genuinely bewildered. I didn't have to, Marcus replied simply. The community organized it themselves. That's what happens when you build relationships based on trust and respect. The boardroom fell silent as the reality of their situation dawned on the members. What had seemed like a straightforward decision to appease a powerful political figure had suddenly become much more complicated. I suggest we take a recess, Dr. Winters proposed, and reconvene when everyone has had time to review these materials and reconsider their position. Rosen nodded reluctantly. We'll meet again tomorrow morning, Dr. Bennett. You may continue your duties in the meantime. As the board members filed out, Dr. Winters lingered behind with Marcus. That went better than expected, she murmured. Thank you for the support, Marcus said sincerely. I didn't know you were rallying the troops. I've been here 27 years, she replied with a wry smile. You learn which battles are worth fighting. This is one of them. Outside the hospital, Marcus found Ayanna waiting in her car. Well? She prompted as he slid into the passenger seat. Round 1 goes to us, he reported. They backed down from demanding my resignation, at least for now. That's just the beginning, Ayanna said, handing him her tablet. Look at this. On the screen was a statement from Karen Whitfield, released to the press just minutes earlier. I want to publicly apologize to Dr. Marcus Bennett for my actions at Meadowbrook Park. What I did was wrong, and based on unconscious biases that I am now working to address. I support Dr. Bennett's call for community programs to address racial profiling and implicit bias training. I take full responsibility for my actions and the harm they caused. Marcus read it twice, hardly believing his eyes. She actually did it, without her husband's approval. And that's not all, Ayanna continued, swiping to another screen. 3 other people have come forward with similar stories about Karen Whitfield calling the police on them. The pattern is undeniable now. How's Councilman Whitfield taking it? Ayanna's smile was razor sharp. Not well. He's called a press conference for this afternoon. My guess is he'll try to paint his wife as emotionally fragile, manipulated by outside forces, anything to distance himself from her statement. And Karen? Is she prepared for the backlash? She says she is. Time will tell. Ayanna started the car. But right now we have somewhere to be. Where? Channel 7 Studios. They want to interview you. Live at noon. Marcus hesitated. I should get back to my patients. Your surgeries aren't until tomorrow, Ayanna reminded him. And this is important, Marcus. People need to hear your story from you, not filtered through sound bites and social media clips. As they drove to the television studio, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Officer Reynolds. Whitfield's people are pressuring the chief to release a statement defending the officer's actions at the park. I'm pushing back, but you should know they're mobilizing. Marcus showed the message to Ayanna, who nodded grimly. Not surprising. The councilman is trying to control the narrative from all angles. At the studio, Marcus was whisked into makeup and given a brief rundown of the interview format. The host, Vanessa Chen, was known for her fair but probing style. Dr. Bennett, she greeted him warmly as he took his seat opposite her. Thank you for joining us today. I know this has been a difficult few days for you. Thank you for having me, Marcus replied, conscious of the cameras and the invisible audience beyond them. Let's start with the incident at the park, Vanessa began. Can you take us through what happened from your perspective? Marcus recounted the events calmly and factually, describing how he'd been taking pictures of Zoe playing when the police approached him. And now we understand the hospital board asked for your resignation, Vanessa prompted. They did, Marcus confirmed, though they've backed away from that position, at least temporarily. Do you believe this was retaliation for speaking out? Marcus chose his words carefully. I believe powerful interests were upset that I wasn't willing to accept a token apology and move on. I believe there are those who would prefer I remain silent about what happened, including Councilman Whitfield. I'll let the councilman speak for himself, Marcus replied diplomatically. But I will say that meaningful change often makes those in power uncomfortable. Vanessa shifted tactics. Karen Whitfield released a statement today apologizing for her actions. Do you accept her apology? I appreciate Mrs. Whitfield's willingness to take responsibility, Marcus said. True reconciliation requires acknowledgement, accountability, and action. She's taken the first 2 steps. The third remains to be seen. What do you hope will come from all this, Dr. Bennett? Marcus leaned forward slightly. I hope my daughter grows up in a world where she isn't viewed with suspicion because of her skin color. I hope for community programs that address implicit bias. I hope for police training that emphasizes de-escalation and cultural awareness. And I hope that when someone experiences what I did, they have the resources and support to speak up. The interview continued for 20 minutes with Marcus maintaining his composure throughout. When it ended, Vanessa shook his hand warmly. You were excellent, she told him off camera. Very measured, very compelling. As Marcus and Ayanna left the studio, his phone exploded with notifications. The interview was already generating buzz online, with clips being shared across platforms. You hit exactly the right tone, Ayanna assured him. Reasonable, focused on solutions, not victimhood. Marcus was about to respond when his phone rang. Mrs. Rodriguez again. Dr. Bennett, she said urgently, you need to come home right away. There's a situation with Zoe at school. His heart dropped. What happened? Is she hurt? No, she's physically fine, Mrs. Rodriguez assured him. But the school called. Some parents complained about Zoe being there, saying it was disruptive with all the media attention. The principal asked if I could pick her up early. Marcus felt a surge of anger. They're punishing my 7-year-old daughter for something that happened to me. It gets worse, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. When I got there, there were reporters in the school parking lot. They started asking Zoe questions, taking pictures. I got her out of there as quickly as I could, but she's upset. I'll be right there, Marcus promised, ending the call and turning to Ayanna. They're going after my daughter now. Ayanna's expression hardened. That crosses a line. We need to get a protection order against the media approaching Zoe. When they arrived at Marcus's house, they found Zoe sitting at the kitchen table, unusually subdued as she picked at a sandwich. "Hey, Zozo," Marcus said gently, sitting beside her. "Rough day?" She nodded, her eyes downcast. "Cassidy said her mom told her I shouldn't be at school because we're troublemakers, and Tyler said his dad said you hate police officers." She looked up at him, her eyes swimming with tears. "That's not true, is it, Daddy?" Marcus pulled her into a hug, his heart breaking. "No, baby, that's not true at all. Some adults are confused about what happened, and they're saying things that aren't right." "Then why did they make me leave school?" she asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Marcus exchanged a glance with Ayanna, who nodded encouragingly. "Sometimes," he began carefully, "when people try to fix something that's wrong, other people get scared or angry. They don't want things to change, even if the change would make things better for everyone." Zoe pulled back, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Like when James wouldn't share the swings, even though there were enough for everyone?" Marcus smiled despite himself. "Something like that, yes. But Ms. Phillips made him share, and then everyone got to have fun." "Exactly, and that's what we're trying to do, make sure the rules are fair for everyone." Zoe seemed to consider this, then asked, "Is that lady from the park still mad at us?" "No, sweetie. In fact, she said she was sorry for what happened." "Then why are people still being mean?" Marcus struggled to find a simple answer to a complex question. Before he could respond, his phone rang again. Dr. Winters. "Marcus," she said without preamble, "have you seen the news? Councilman Whitfield just threw his wife under the bus at his press conference, said she's been under emotional strain and that her statement doesn't reflect their family's position. He's calling for the hospital to maintain its standards and take action against disruptive elements." "Meaning me," Marcus concluded. "Exactly. And he's organized a counter-petition from hospital donors threatening to withdraw support if the board doesn't address the situation appropriately." As Marcus hung up, Ayanna's phone chimed with a text. "It's Karen Whitfield," she reported, scanning the message. "She wants to meet again. Says her husband has locked her out of their house and is threatening to destroy her reputation if she doesn't retract her statement." Marcus looked from Ayanna to Zoe, who was watching him with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing. The conflict had escalated beyond anything he could have anticipated, affecting not just his career now but his daughter's well-being, and apparently Karen's safety as well. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. Ayanna's expression was resolute. "We fight back. Not just for you, but for everyone caught in the crossfire. This just became about much more than one afternoon in the park." Zoe reached for her father's hand. "We're not troublemakers, right, Daddy? We're just trying to make things fair." Marcus squeezed her hand, finding strength in her simple wisdom. "That's right, baby. And that's exactly what we're going to do." The small conference room at Ayanna's law office offered privacy that had become increasingly precious. Karen Whitfield sat across from Marcus and Ayanna, her usual polished appearance noticeably disheveled. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her typically perfect manicure chipped, and she kept twisting her wedding ring nervously. "He's frozen our joint accounts," she explained, her voice strained. "Changed the locks on the house while I was out. His chief of staff called to tell me not to come back until I was ready to be reasonable." She let out a bitter laugh. "Reasonable meaning I should recant my apology and claim I was manipulated or under duress." Ayanna slid a glass of water toward Karen. Your husband is trying to salvage his political career at your expense. Richard has always been about appearances, Karen admitted. 20 years of marriage, and I've always played my part. The supportive wife, the charity organizer, the perfect political spouse. But this, she shook her head. I can't pretend anymore. Not after what I saw in your daughter's eyes, Dr. Bennett. Marcus studied her carefully. Mrs. Whitfield, Karen, please, she interrupted. After everything that's happened, formalities seem ridiculous. Karen, he amended. I appreciate your stand, truly. But I have to ask, why now? What changed? Karen was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Do you know what it's like to suddenly see yourself clearly for the first time? To realize that the person you've become isn't who you thought you were? She didn't wait for an answer. When your daughter confronted me in the park, it was like looking in a mirror I'd been avoiding, and I didn't like what I saw. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. I've spent years moving through the world thinking I was one of the good ones. I have black colleagues. I donate to diversity initiatives. I post the right things on social media. But when it actually mattered, when I saw you in that park, all of that fell away, and what was left? Karen's eyes met Marcus's directly. Fear, assumptions, prejudice. The raw honesty was unexpected, and Marcus found himself reevaluating the woman sitting before them. My daughter saw the video, Karen continued. Ella is 14, curious, aware. She came home from school asking why everyone was talking about her mom, why classmates were sending her links and messages. Karen's voice caught. The look on her face when she realized what I'd done, that's what changed me. I couldn't explain it away, couldn't justify it. And I knew in that moment I had to choose between being the person my husband wanted me to be and the person my daughter needed me to be. Ayanna leaned forward. Your public statement changed the dynamic significantly. The councilman is now in damage control mode. He's furious, Karen confirmed. Says I've destroyed everything he's built, that I've ruined us. Her voice dropped to nearly a whisper. Maybe he's right. Or maybe, Marcus suggested quietly, you're finally building something real. Karen looked up, surprised. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, he continued, especially publicly, especially when it costs you something. I don't know what to do now, Karen admitted. Richard has all the power, all the connections. I have nowhere to go, no access to our accounts. Ayanna's expression was calculating. What if you could use that? What if Richard's attempts to silence you became part of the story? Karen looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, Ayanna elaborated, that retaliation is part of why systemic problems persist. People stay silent because speaking up comes with consequences. Your husband has just provided a perfect example of those consequences in action. You want me to go public about Richard locking me out? Karen's eyes widened. He would never forgive that. Is his forgiveness what you're seeking? Marcus asked gently. The question hung in the air as Karen considered it. No, she finally said. I guess it isn't. Before we discuss next steps, Ayanna said, there's something you should know. Dr. Bennett's daughter was pulled from school today because of this controversy. Reporters approached her and other parents complained about her presence. Karen's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, she's just a child. 7 years old. Marcus confirmed, his voice tight. Old enough to understand she's being punished for something she didn't do, but not old enough to understand why. Tears welled in Karen's eyes. I am so sorry. I never intended. I know, Marcus interrupted. But intentions and impact are different things. My daughter is bearing the consequences of adult actions and prejudices, and she's not the only one. This happens every day to black children across this country. but most don't have a father with a medical degree and media attention to shield them. Karen nodded solemnly, wiping away tears. What can I do? Ayanna exchanged a glance with Marcus before answering. We're organizing a community forum at First Baptist Church tomorrow evening. People from across the city are coming to share their experiences with racial profiling. It would be powerful if you were there, not just to apologize, but to listen. Richard will see it as a betrayal, Karen said, though her tone suggested she'd already made her decision. Perhaps, Marcus acknowledged, but your daughter will see it as courage. Karen straightened her shoulders. I'll be there. After Karen left, Ayanna turned to Marcus. Are you sure about this? Including Karen could be risky. Some in the community might see it as centering the white perspective again. It's a calculated risk, Marcus admitted, but showing accountability and growth is part of the solution. And practically speaking, her presence will draw media attention that might otherwise ignore another forum on racial profiling. Ayanna nodded thoughtfully. True, and the contrast between her actions and her husband's speaks volumes. She began gathering her papers. I've got to file this injunction to keep reporters away from Zoe. What about you? Back to the hospital, Marcus replied. I have patients waiting, and I won't let Whitfield or the board interfere with that. When Marcus arrived at Mercy Hospital, the atmosphere was noticeably tense. Colleagues who normally greeted him warmly now offered tight smiles or avoided eye contact altogether. At the nurses' station, however, head nurse Gabriela Martinez approached him directly. Dr. Bennett, she said warmly, we've rescheduled your surgeries as requested, and the nurses wanted you to know we're behind you 100%. Thank you, Gabby, Marcus replied, touched by the support. I know taking a stand isn't easy for anyone right now. She waved away his concern. We take care of our own. Besides, she added with a wry smile, most of us have experienced our share of Karens. No offense to Mrs. Whitfield's recent change of heart. Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Winters appeared, her expression grave. Marcus, a word? They stepped into a nearby consultation room, where Winters closed the door firmly behind them. The board split, she reported without preamble. Whitfield has half of them scared to death about losing donors, but your petition and staff support have the other half reconsidering. They're at an impasse. That's better than united against me, Marcus observed. Yes, but Whitfield's not giving up. He's scheduled a private fundraising dinner tonight with several major hospital donors. Word is he'll be painting you as an agitator using a misunderstanding to push a political agenda. Marcus sighed, leaning against the wall. Of course he is. There's more, Winters continued. The chief of police issued a statement defending his officers' actions as following protocol, while acknowledging they could have shown more sensitivity. It's a non-apology apology, clearly trying to thread the needle. Reynolds warned me this was coming, Marcus nodded. Whitfield's influence reaches far. You need to be prepared for a long fight, Winters cautioned. This won't be resolved in a news cycle or two. I know, Marcus agreed. But I didn't choose this battle, Eleanor. It chose me. Just remember you're not alone in it, she replied firmly. Now, you have patients waiting. For the next several hours, Marcus immersed himself in his work, finding solace in the familiar routine of rounds, consultations, and treatment plans. Here, in the pediatric ward, he wasn't Dr. Bennett from the viral video. He was just the doctor these children and parents trusted. It was a brief respite from the storm raging outside. That evening, as Marcus was finishing his notes, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My father is using my mother. She's telling the truth. I have proof. It was signed simply, Ella W. Marcus stared at the message, his mind racing. Ella Whitfield, Karen's 14-year-old daughter. How had she gotten his number? And more importantly, what proof could she possibly have? He showed the text to Ayanna when she picked him up outside the hospital. This could be a trap, she warned. Whitfield using his daughter to get information or recorded statements from you. Or it could be exactly what it appears to be, Marcus countered. A teenager trying to do what she thinks is right. Either way, we need to be careful, Ayanna insisted. Any communication with a minor, especially Whitfield's daughter, has to be above reproach. They agreed that Marcus would respond asking for more information, but would not meet with Ella alone under any circumstances. His carefully worded reply received an immediate answer. Check your email. I sent recordings. When they reached Marcus's home, they found Mrs. Rodriguez preparing dinner, while Zoe set the table, seemingly in better spirits than earlier. We had a good afternoon, Mrs. Rodriguez reported. We played games, baked cookies, and Zoe told me all about her science project. It's about heart surgery, Zoe announced proudly. Like what Daddy does. Marcus smiled, grateful for Mrs. Rodriguez's steady presence and his daughter's resilience. After dinner, and getting Zoe settled with a movie, he and Ayanna retreated to his home office to check the mysterious email. Sure enough, there was a message from a new account clearly created for this purpose. The subject line read simply, "The truth about my father." Attached were 3 audio files. Ayanna looked at Marcus skeptically. This could still be a setup. Only one way to find out, he replied, clicking on the first file. Richard Whitfield's voice filled the room, angry and unfiltered. I don't care what you actually think, Karen. This is about damage control. You will retract your statement, blame it on emotional distress, and stick to the script. Do you have any idea what you've done to my career, to our standing in this community? Karen's voice was quieter but defiant. What about what I've done to that doctor and his little girl? What about the other people I called the police on? Don't they matter? For God's sake, Karen, stop being so naive. This isn't about them, it's about us. Everything I've built, everything we have, is at risk because you've suddenly decided to grow a conscience. The recording continued, documenting an ugly argument that laid bare the councilman's true priorities. The second file captured Whitfield on the phone with someone discussing how to pressure the hospital board. The third was the most damning, Whitfield speaking with the police chief, explicitly asking him to make this Bennett situation go away and reminding him who had supported his appointment. When the recordings ended, Ayanna let out a low whistle. This is explosive. And obtained without consent, Marcus pointed out. Possibly illegal, definitely inadmissible in court. True, Ayanna conceded, but in the court of public opinion, this would end Whitfield's career. Marcus ran a hand over his face, conflicted. These recordings came from his teenage daughter, Ayanna. Using them could tear that family apart. That family is already being torn apart, Ayanna argued, by Whitfield himself. Before they could debate further, another email arrived, this one from Ella directly. I know you might not want to use these, but I'm sending them because my mom is doing the right thing, and my dad is trying to destroy her for it. She's staying with my aunt now. He told everyone she's having a breakdown. She's not. She's finally standing up for herself, and I want to help her. Please don't tell them I recorded these. The raw honesty of the message moved Marcus. This wasn't just about him anymore, or even about the broader issue of racial profiling. It was about a family in crisis, a daughter trying to support her mother's moral stand, a web of relationships being tested by the sudden intrusion of truth. What do we do? He asked Ayanna. We sleep on it, she advised. Tomorrow's community forum is already going to be charged. We need to think carefully before adding this dimension. As Ayanna left for the night, Marcus checked on Zoe, who had fallen asleep on the couch during her movie. He carried her to bed, tucking her in gently. As he brushed a curl from her forehead, he wondered what kind of world she would inherit from all of this. whether anything they were doing would make a difference in how she would be seen and treated in the years to come. His phone buzzed with another text, this one from Officer Reynolds. "Heads up. Just heard Whitfield has investigators digging into your past, looking for anything they can use against you. Stay vigilant." Marcus stared at the message, a chill running through him. The battle lines were clearly drawn now, and Whitfield was escalating. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back to the way things were before that afternoon in the park. First Baptist Church was filled to capacity by the time Marcus arrived. People stood along the walls and crowded the back of the sanctuary, their faces representing the diversity of the city itself. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes extended skyward like mechanical flowers reaching for the sun. Marcus had left Zoe with Mrs. Rodriguez at his colleague Dr. Chen's house across town, away from the media attention and any potential confrontation. As he made his way to the front where Ayanna waited with community leaders, he felt the weight of countless eyes following his movement, heard the whispers that accompanied his passage. Pastor Michael Turner, a tall man with graying temples and a commanding presence, stepped to the microphone. "Brothers and sisters, neighbors and friends, we gather tonight not in anger but in purpose, not in division but in unity, not to point fingers but to join hands." His resonant voice filled the space. "Tonight we bear witness to lived experiences. We listen to understand. We speak to be heard. And together we begin the work of healing and change." The forum began with personal testimonies. A delivery driver who was followed by police after dropping off packages in an affluent neighborhood, a high school student detained for matching a description, a woman whose routine traffic stop escalated when officers questioned whether the car was really hers. Story after story, pattern after pattern, building a mosaic of experiences that could no longer be dismissed as isolated incidents. Marcus sat quietly, listening. Though he'd been asked to speak, he wasn't in a hurry to take the microphone. This wasn't about him. It was about something much bigger, something that had been happening long before his afternoon at the park, and would continue long after if nothing changed. When Pastor Turner finally introduced him, Marcus approached the podium with measured steps. The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. "I'm not here as a symbol or a hashtag," Marcus began, his voice steady. "I'm here as a father who wants his daughter to grow up in a world that sees her humanity before her skin color. I'm here as a doctor who believes in healing not just bodies, but communities. I'm here as a citizen who believes we can be better than our worst assumptions." He recounted the incident at the park without embellishment, then continued. "What happened to me has happened to countless others without cameras present, without medical degrees to lend credibility, without a platform to speak from. The difference isn't the incident, it's the attention it received." Marcus paused, surveying the room. "There are those who want this conversation to go away, who believe questioning the status quo threatens their comfort, their power, their worldview. But a wound doesn't heal when hidden. It festers, it spreads, it poisons the whole body." He glanced at Ayanna, who nodded encouragingly. "I didn't choose to become part of this conversation, but now that I am, I have a responsibility to use this moment for meaningful change. Not just for my daughter, but for every child who deserves to play in a park without suspicion, to drive without fear, to exist without constantly proving they belong." The applause that followed was genuine and prolonged. As Marcus returned to his seat, Pastor Turner announced the next speaker, a surprise addition to the program. "We have someone else who wishes to address our gathering," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Someone whose perspective offers another dimension to our conversation. I ask that you extend the grace of listening, even when difficult." Karen Whitfield approached the microphone, visibly nervous but determined. Her appearance caused a ripple of murmurs through the audience, some curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. "I don't deserve your time or attention," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm the person who called the police on Dr. Bennett. I'm the woman from the park." She took a deep breath. "I'm also someone who's learning, painfully, how prejudice can hide in plain sight, especially from ourselves." The room was utterly silent now, all eyes fixed on this unexpected speaker. "For years, I've told myself I wasn't racist. I donated to the right causes, said the right things, even had friends of different backgrounds." Karen shook her head. "But when it mattered, when I saw Dr. Bennett in the park with his daughter, none of that performative goodness protected him from my assumptions. None of it stopped me from seeing a threat where there was only a father." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I can't undo what I did. I can't erase the hurt and humiliation I caused, but I can acknowledge it. I can learn from it. And I can commit to doing better, not with words, but with actions." She looked directly at Marcus. "Dr. Bennett didn't have to forgive me. He could have rightfully dismissed my apology. Instead, he challenged me to be part of the solution, to use my privilege and position to help create change. That's why I'm here. Not to center myself or seek absolution, but to stand accountable and join the work that needs to be done." As Karen stepped away from the microphone, the audience's reaction was mixed. Some applauded her courage, others remained reserved. But the tension in the room had shifted, becoming something more nuanced than simple anger or resentment. Pastor Turner reclaimed the podium. "This is what courage looks like, friends. Not the absence of fear or mistake, but the willingness to face them, to grow from them, to do the hard work of reconciliation." The forum continued with discussions about specific policy proposals, community oversight boards for police, implicit bias training, educational initiatives. The energy in the room was focused and determined, a community channeling pain into purpose. Near the end of the evening, as Marcus was speaking with community members, a commotion at the back of the sanctuary drew everyone's attention. Councilman Richard Whitfield strode down the center aisle, flanked by aides, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Behind him, looking both defiant and frightened, was a teenage girl Marcus recognized immediately from photos as Ella Whitfield. "This has gone far enough," Whitfield announced loudly, ignoring the pastor's attempts to quiet him. "Karen, this public spectacle ends now. You're coming home, and we're putting this unfortunate episode behind us." Karen stood rooted to the spot, her face pale but resolute. "Richard, this isn't the place." "Clearly not," he agreed coldly. "The place for family matters is at home, not on a stage as part of some activist agenda." He looked around the room with undisguised contempt. "And you," he addressed the audience, "should be ashamed exploiting a woman's temporary emotional fragility for political purposes." Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. Ayanna stepped forward, her posture protective as she positioned herself near Karen. "Councilman Whitfield, your wife is here of her own free will. She's an adult capable of making her own choices." Whitfield's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Is that what this is about? Choices? Tell me, did she choose to have her access to our accounts frozen? Did she choose to have our private matters dragged into the public eye? Did she choose to have her reputation and mental state questioned?" "No," Karen replied quietly but firmly. "You did all that, Richard, when I refused to lie for you." The councilman's face darkened. "This is exactly what I mean about emotional fragility. Karen, we're leaving. Now." He reached for her arm. "Don't touch her." Ella suddenly spoke up, her young voice cutting through the tension. "You don't get to manhandle her anymore." All eyes turned to the teenager, whose resemblance to her mother was striking despite her youth. Whitfield looked genuinely shocked at his daughter's intervention. Ella, go wait in the car, he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. No, she replied simply. I'm staying with Mom. This is ridiculous, Whitfield sputtered. You've both lost your minds. Actually, Marcus said, stepping forward for the first time, they've found their voices. Maybe it's time you listened. Whitfield turned on him, eyes blazing. You. This is all because of you. My wife apologized for her mistake. That should have been the end of it, but instead you had to push, had to make this into some crusade. This was always bigger than just an apology, Marcus replied calmly. This is about systems that protect some and punish others based on appearance. This is about accountability that goes beyond words to actual change. You want accountability? Whitfield's voice rose dangerously. Fine. Let's talk about who you really are, Dr. Bennett. My investigators have been busy. He pulled a folder from his aide's hands. Did you know your perfect doctor has a juvenile record? Arrested at 17 for trespassing and resisting arrest. A gasp went through the crowd. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He hadn't thought about that incident in years. A stupid teenage mistake, caught jumping a fence at an abandoned property on a dare, running from police out of fear rather than guilt. That record was sealed, he said quietly. Records have a way of opening when you know the right people, Whitfield replied smugly. Not so perfect after all, are you? Before Marcus could respond, Ella stepped forward again, phone in hand. Neither are you, Dad. She looked around the room. My father threatened to destroy my mother's reputation. He tried to force her to lie. He said this wasn't about Dr. Bennett or what happened at the park. It was about his career and what people would think of him. Ella, stop this right now, Whitfield warned, his confidence faltering. I recorded him, she continued, her voice growing stronger. I recorded everything. The threats, the lies, the calls to the police chief and hospital board. And I sent the recordings to Dr. Bennett. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Whitfield's face drained of color as he stared at his daughter in disbelief. You did what? I chose the truth, she answered simply. Just like Mom did. Whitfield looked frantically around the room, suddenly aware of the reporters present, the phones recording, the witnesses to his unraveling. This is a private family matter. We're leaving now. I'm not going with you, Karen said firmly. Neither is Ella. We're staying with my sister until things are sorted out. You can't just... Yes, she can, Ayanna interrupted. And if you attempt to coerce either of them, I'll personally file for an emergency restraining order. Your choice, Councilman. For a moment it seemed Whitfield might explode with rage, but political instinct prevailed, and he managed a tight smile for the watching crowd. We'll discuss this at home, Karen, when you're thinking more clearly. With that, he turned and strode back up the aisle, his aides scrambling to keep up. In his wake, the sanctuary buzzed with conversation. Pastor Turner called for calm, but the energy of the room had fundamentally changed. What had begun as a community forum on racial profiling had now exposed the raw power dynamics at play, not just in policing, but in marriages, families, political structures, and institutions. As reporters pressed forward, Karen put a protective arm around Ella's shoulders. I think we've had enough public exposure for one night, she said, looking exhausted but somehow lighter. Ayanna, can you help us leave without being swarmed? Marcus watched them go, feeling both admiration for their courage and concern for what they would face next. Whitfield was cornered now, and cornered men were dangerous. The councilman had already shown he would stop at nothing to protect his reputation, including digging into Marcus's past. That night, as Marcus checked on a sleeping Zoe at Dr. Chen's house, his phone rang with a call from Dr. Winters. Marcus, she said without preamble, Whitfield just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's pushing for immediate termination based on moral character concerns. My juvenile record, Marcus confirmed grimly. Yes, and he's threatening major donors will pull funding if the board doesn't act. She paused. This is getting ugly, Marcus. It's been ugly from the start, Eleanor. The difference is now it's all out in the open. After ending the call, Marcus sat quietly in Dr. Chen's guest room, weighing his options. He could fight the board, potentially win, given the community support and the revelations about Whitfield. But at what cost? How long could he subject Zoe to this turmoil? How many resources would be drained from the actual work of change to fight this personal battle? As he contemplated his next move, a text arrived from Officer Reynolds. Recordings are out. Someone leaked them to the press. Whitfield is finished. Marcus stared at the message, feeling not triumph, but a complex mixture of vindication and regret. The truth was out, but at what cost to Ella, to Karen, even to Whitfield himself, whose public disgrace would affect more lives than just his own. Change never came without cost. The question was, who would bear it, and whether the outcome would be worth the price. The morning news was dominated by Councilman Whitfield's voice, scratchy but unmistakable, playing on every local channel. I don't care what actually happened. This is about perception, about control. Bennett needs to be shut down before he does any more damage. Marcus watched the coverage from Dr. Chen's kitchen, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. The recordings had been leaked overnight to every major news outlet in the city. Whitfield's unvarnished words, his naked ambition and callous disregard for truth, were now public knowledge. Daddy, why are you on TV again? Zoe asked, wandering into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Marcus quickly changed the channel. Just some grown-up business, baby. Nothing for you to worry about. Dr. Chen, a petite woman with a gentle manner but steely resolve, entered with a plate of freshly cut fruit. Zoe, would you like to help me feed the fish in my aquarium? I think they're extra hungry this morning. As Zoe eagerly followed Dr. Chen into the living room, Marcus's phone buzzed with messages. The hospital board meeting had been moved up to 9 a.m. Reporters were gathering outside Mercy Hospital. The mayor had issued a statement calling for calm and reason during this difficult time. Ayana arrived 30 minutes later, impeccably dressed and laser-focused. We need to get to the hospital, she said without preamble. The board's trying to move fast before public momentum builds in your favor. How did the recordings get leaked? Marcus asked, his voice low so Zoe wouldn't overhear. Please tell me you didn't. It wasn't me, Ayana assured him. My guess? Either Ella herself or one of the reporters at the forum last night. Those mics pick up more than people realize. This could destroy that family, Marcus said, troubled. That family was already broken, Ayana replied gently. This just exposed the cracks. They arrived at Mercy Hospital through a side entrance, avoiding the media gathered at the main doors. The atmosphere inside was electric. Staff members huddled in small groups, conversations halting as Marcus passed. Dr. Winters met them outside the boardroom. It's a full house in there, she warned. Not just the board. Whitfield brought lawyers, but he also looks like he hasn't slept in days. She handed Marcus a thick folder. Statements from every department head supporting you, petitions from patients, letters from community organizations. I've been busy. Thank you, Eleanor, Marcus said sincerely. Whatever happens in there, save it, she interrupted with a tight smile. We're not done fighting yet. Inside the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Board members sat stiffly around the long table, avoiding eye contact. Whitfield was there, as promised, flanked by two stern-faced attorneys. His usual polished appearance had slipped. His tie was slightly askew, shadows darkened the skin beneath his eyes, and a nervous tic pulled at his left cheek. Board Chairman Rosen called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. We're here to discuss recent developments concerning Dr. Marcus Bennett's continued employment with Mercy Hospital. Recent developments? Dr. Winters repeated incredulously. You mean the fact that Councilman Whitfield's corruption and intimidation tactics have been exposed for all to hear? Or are we discussing Dr. Bennett's exemplary surgical record and the hundreds of children whose lives he saved? Rosen cleared his throat uncomfortably. Dr. Winters, please. We must maintain decorum. Decorum? Ayanna echoed, rising from her seat. Is that what we're calling it when a public official tries to destroy a distinguished physician's career because he dared to speak out against racial profiling? When that same official attempts to force his wife to lie and now seeks retribution because she chose integrity over his political career? Whitfield's attorney interjected sharply. Ms. Washington, these recordings were obtained illegally and have no bearing on... They have every bearing, Marcus cut in, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced the room. They demonstrate exactly why this board is meeting today. Not because of my professional conduct, not because of my medical expertise, but because Councilman Whitfield decided I was a problem that needed to be eliminated. He opened the folder Dr. Winters had given him. I have here statements from every department head at this hospital supporting my continued employment. I have petitions signed by hundreds of patients and their families. I have letters from community organizations attesting to my character and contributions. He laid the documents on the table. What I don't have is a single valid reason why my position at this hospital should be in jeopardy. Whitfield could contain himself no longer. What about your criminal record, Doctor? Does that count as a valid reason? A murmur ran through the room. Marcus met Whitfield's gaze steadily. You mean the sealed juvenile record from 20 years ago? When I was 17 and made the mistake of running from police after trespassing on an abandoned property? The charges that were later reduced because the judge recognized it as teenage stupidity rather than criminal intent. He leaned forward. Yes, Councilman. I made a mistake as a teenager. I learned from it. I worked twice as hard to overcome it. I became a doctor who saves lives every day. What have you learned from your mistakes? What have you overcome except the temptation to be honest? Whitfield's face flushed dark red. How dare you lecture me about honesty while you parade around as some kind of moral authority? You're using one unfortunate incident to advance a political agenda, to paint my wife as a racist, to destroy everything I've built. Richard? A quiet voice interrupted from the doorway. Karen Whitfield stood there, composed and resolute, with Ella slightly behind her. No one destroyed anything. You did this to yourself. The room fell silent as Karen walked to the center of the boardroom. Members of the board, I came here today not as the councilman's wife, but as someone who witnessed firsthand how power can corrupt and intimidate. My husband has pressured you, threatened you, manipulated you into taking action against a physician whose only crime was refusing to be silenced. She turned to face Whitfield. It's over, Richard. The recordings are public. Your calls to the police chief, to donors, to board members. Everyone knows what you tried to do. Whitfield stared at his wife as though seeing her for the first time. Karen, you're making a terrible mistake. No, she replied firmly. I'm finally correcting one. Before Whitfield could respond, there was a commotion outside the boardroom. Through the glass doors, a crowd of hospital staff had gathered, nurses, doctors, technicians, orderlies, administrators. Their voices grew louder, more insistent, until someone opened the door and their chant became clear. Bennett stays! Bennett stays! Dr. Winters smiled grimly. I might have mentioned this morning's meeting in the staff lounge. Chairman Rosen looked from the staff demonstration to Whitfield to Marcus, then shook his head in resignation. I believe we need to reconsider our position, he admitted. Turning to Marcus, he added, Dr. Bennett, on behalf of the board, I apologize for this unnecessary proceeding. Your position at Mercy Hospital is secure. The room erupted in applause from some board members while others sat in stony silence. Whitfield's attorneys whispered urgently to him, but he brushed them off, rising from his seat with cold fury etched across his features. "This isn't over," he warned, his voice low but carrying. "None of this would have happened if the police had done their job properly at that park. If they'd taken a firmer approach with you, Dr. Bennett, perhaps you wouldn't have felt so emboldened to destroy lives." With that parting shot, he strode from the room, leaving a wake of tension behind him. His meaning was clear. Marcus had escaped one threat only to potentially face another. Officer Reynolds pulled Marcus aside as the board meeting dispersed. "Whitfield just left looking like murder," he observed grimly. "I don't like it. He still has influence with some elements in the department, especially the ones resistant to reform." "What are you saying?" Marcus asked. "I'm saying be careful," Reynolds warned. "Whitfield seems like a man with nothing left to lose. Those are the most dangerous kind." As Marcus and Ayanna left the hospital, cheered by staff members lining the corridors, the victory felt incomplete. Yes, his job was secure. Yes, Whitfield's true nature had been exposed. But there was still the uneasy sense that they were in the eye of the storm rather than beyond it. That afternoon, Marcus sat with Zoe in Dr. Chen's backyard, watching her play with the neighbor's dog through the fence. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages of support, interview requests, and updates about the fallout from the recordings. The mayor had called for an ethics investigation into Whitfield's conduct. The police chief had issued a statement distancing himself from the councilman. 3 hospital board members had resigned, citing personal reasons, and Karen Whitfield had filed for legal separation, according to a terse press release from her attorney. "How much longer do we have to stay here, Daddy?" Zoe asked, looking up from her game. "I miss my room. I miss my toys." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "Just a little while longer, baby. Things are still a bit complicated, because of the park lady and the police." "Yes," he admitted, "but also because sometimes doing the right thing takes time." Zoe considered this thoughtfully. "Ms. Phillips says that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always important." "Your teacher is very wise," Marcus smiled, marveling at his daughter's resilience and understanding. Ayanna arrived later that evening with Thai food and updates. Whitfield's official response is that the recordings were selectively edited and taken out of context, she reported, as they sat in Dr. Chen's dining room. But 3 city council members have already called for his resignation, and the ethics investigation is moving forward. He's political poison now. "And Karen? Ella?" Marcus asked. "Staying with Karen's sister in the suburbs. They've hired security after receiving threats from some of Whitfield's more zealous supporters." Ayanna hesitated. "There's something else." Reynolds called. Whitfield was seen meeting with Officer Draymond this afternoon, one of the officers resistant to reform, known for excessive force complaints. Marcus absorbed this information silently. He wouldn't be stupid enough to try something directly. "Maybe not," Ayanna agreed. "But he could encourage others to make your life difficult. Selective enforcement, random stops, the kind of low-level harassment that's hard to prove but wears you down." "So even with everything that's happened, nothing's really changed," Marcus observed bitterly. "No," Ayanna corrected him. "Everything's changed. The conversation is happening at every level. In boardrooms, in patrol cars, in living rooms across the city. People are questioning assumptions they've held for years. That's how real change begins." She pulled out her tablet. "Look at this. Community organizations are coordinating with the police department on new training protocols. The mayor's office is establishing a civilian oversight committee. 3 other hospitals have reached out about implementing bias training for staff. And all this started because you refused to accept that what happened in the park was normal or acceptable." Marcus glanced toward the guest room where Zoe was sleeping. I just wanted to protect my daughter. And you are, Ayanna assured him, not just for today, but for her future, for all our futures. As Ayanna was leaving, her phone rang. Her expression turned serious as she listened to the caller. "When?" she asked sharply. "Are they sure?" Another pause. "Keep me posted." She turned to Marcus, her face grave. "Whitfield's gone. Cleaned out his office this afternoon. Didn't tell his staff where he was going. His lawyer says he's taking personal time to reflect. But Reynolds' sources say he withdrew a significant amount of cash before disappearing." "You think he's running?" Marcus asked. "Or planning something," Ayanna replied, her voice tight with concern. "Either way, stay vigilant. This story isn't over yet." After she left, Marcus double-checked the locks on Dr. Chen's doors and windows, an uneasiness settling over him. Whitfield had lost everything: his political standing, his marriage, his reputation. Men like that rarely accepted defeat gracefully. They looked for someone to blame, someone to punish. Looking in on his sleeping daughter, Marcus silently renewed the promise he'd made when Alyssa died, to protect Zoe with everything he had. Whatever came next, whatever price he had to pay for speaking up, he would face it. But he would not allow his daughter to become collateral damage in a battle she never asked for. As he finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Whitfield's final move in this twisted game was yet to come. 3 days passed with no sign of Richard Whitfield. His absence became its own kind of presence, a shadow that followed Marcus everywhere, made him check his rearview mirror more often, caused him to scrutinize strangers on the street with wary eyes. The uncertainty was its own form of torment. "You can't keep living like this," Ayanna told Marcus as they sat in her office reviewing the latest developments. "You and Zoe need to get back to normal. That's the best way to show Whitfield he hasn't won." "Normal?" Marcus echoed with a hollow laugh. "I'm not sure I remember what that looks like." It had been just over a week since the incident at the park, a single moment that had somehow expanded to consume his entire existence. His face had been on every local news broadcast. His name appeared in national headlines. Strangers stopped him in public to express support or occasionally to mutter disapproval. Through it all, he tried to shield Zoe from the worst of it, but children had a way of absorbing tension like sponges. "Daddy," she'd asked that morning, "are the bad people gone now?" The question had pierced him. What could he tell her? That there were no bad people, just complicated ones, that the situation wasn't resolved, might never be fully resolved, that the man who had sought to destroy their lives had vanished like smoke, potentially plotting revenge. "Most of them," he'd answered finally, "and lots of good people are looking out for us." Now, sitting in Ayanna's office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Marcus felt the weight of the past week pressing down on him. Zoe wants to go home. She misses her routine, her toys, her room. Ayanna nodded thoughtfully. "Reynolds has had officers watching your house. No suspicious activity. The media circus has mostly moved on to fresher stories." She tapped her pen against her desk. "Maybe it is time to reclaim your space, your life. And if Whitfield is out there, waiting, then he'll find you surrounded by a community that's watching out for you." Ayanna's expression softened. "Marcus, you can't live in fear indefinitely. That's letting him win in a different way." Later that afternoon, Officer Reynolds met Marcus at his house, which had stood empty since the night of the community forum. Yellow journalism flyers opposing the anti-police agenda had been stuffed in the mailbox, and someone had scrawled "race baiter" on the sidewalk in chalk, but otherwise the property was untouched. "We've had patrols keeping an eye on the place," Reynolds explained as they walked through the rooms. "No signs of break-ins or tampering. Still, I'd recommend a security system if you don't already have one." Marcus nodded, taking in the familiar spaces that somehow felt different now, as if the events of the past week had physically altered his home's dimensions. Zoe's drawings still adorned the refrigerator. His medical journals sat stacked on the coffee table. Everything was as they'd left it, yet nothing felt the same. "Any leads on Whitfield's whereabouts?" he asked, checking the locks on the windows. Reynolds shook his head. "Nothing concrete. His credit cards haven't been used since he withdrew that cash. His phones are either off or discarded. His passport hasn't been flagged at any borders." "That's not very reassuring." "No," Reynolds agreed grimly. "It's not. But disappearing is one thing. Coming back to cause trouble is another. Whitfield's under investigation by the Ethics Committee. The DA's office is reviewing the recordings for possible criminal charges, and every journalist in the city would recognize him on sight. He'd be taking an enormous risk showing his face anywhere near you." As Reynolds left, promising to have patrols continue monitoring the area, Marcus began preparing the house for Zoe's return. He changed the sheets on her bed, arranged her stuffed animals in their customary positions, and made sure her favorite cereal was in the pantry. These small, normal acts felt like reclaiming territory, like pushing back against the chaos that had engulfed them. Dr. Chen dropped Zoe off that evening, the little girl racing through the front door with excited energy. "My room! My toys!" she exclaimed, darting from one familiar object to another, as if confirming they were all still there. "Everything's just as you left it, Zozo," Marcus assured her, watching her reunion with her belongings with a bittersweet smile. Children were remarkably resilient, but he worried about the invisible marks these experiences might leave. That night, after tucking Zoe in with extra stories and cuddles, Marcus sat on his back porch, nursing a glass of bourbon and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Winters. "Board approved the bias training program today, mandatory for all staff. First small step of many. You made this happen." He smiled faintly, feeling a flicker of satisfaction amid the lingering unease. Perhaps some good would come from all this after all. Perhaps Zoe would grow up in a slightly better world because he'd refused to stay silent. The next morning marked Marcus's return to his regular surgical schedule. Walking through the hospital corridors felt like a homecoming of sorts. Nurses greeted him warmly, colleagues stopped to express support, even patients' families offered encouraging words. The hospital's atmosphere had shifted subtly. Conversations about race and bias that had once been avoided were now happening openly, if sometimes awkwardly. In the surgeon's lounge, Dr. Winters handed him a cup of coffee. "The hospital's establishing a community advisory board," she informed him. "Representatives from different neighborhoods helping shape our policies, outreach, everything. They want you to be a liaison." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Just weeks ago, the board wanted me gone. Now they want me as the face of community relations? Amazing what a little public pressure can accomplish, isn't it?" She smiled wryly. "Plus, 3 board members resigned. The new ones are considerably more progressive." As Marcus changed into his scrubs, preparing for a complex cardiac procedure on a 4-year-old patient, he felt himself slipping into the familiar focus of his work. Here, in the operating room, he wasn't Dr. Bennett from the viral video or the man who stood up to Councilman Whitfield. He was simply a surgeon with skilled hands and a job to do. There was comfort in that simplicity, that purpose. The surgery was successful, the child's heart repaired, his prognosis excellent. As Marcus explained the procedure to the grateful parents, he noticed their glances of recognition. They'd seen him on the news, knew about the controversy, but it didn't matter. Here, in this moment, he was the doctor who had saved their son. Nothing else mattered. Days passed, then weeks. Gradually, a new normal established itself. Zoe returned to school where the principal had implemented strict policies about media access and had organized age-appropriate discussions about bias and fairness. Marcus resumed his full caseload at the hospital, while also participating in the newly formed Community Advisory Board. The story that had dominated headlines began to fade from public consciousness, replaced by newer controversies and crises. Richard Whitfield remained missing, but as time passed, the immediate fear of his retaliation diminished. The ethics investigation continued in his absence, as did the police department's internal review of racial profiling incidents. Karen and Ella Whitfield moved into a modest apartment across town. Karen had found work at a nonprofit focused on community mediation, while Ella adjusted to a new school. They kept in occasional contact with Marcus, their unlikely bond forged through extraordinary circumstances. "It's strange," Karen told Marcus during a brief encounter at a community forum. "I've lost my home, my status, my financial security. By all measures, my life is worse than before. Yet somehow, I feel more myself than I have in years." Marcus understood completely. Despite the upheaval, the stress, the lingering wariness, he too felt a new clarity. Speaking his truth, standing his ground, it had changed him, strengthened him in ways he hadn't anticipated. 6 weeks after the incident at the park, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at the hospital. Officer Reynolds appeared outside the surgical ward, his expression unusually somber. "We found Whitfield," he announced without preamble. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Where?" "Tijuana. Mexican authorities picked him up during a bar fight. He was drunk, incoherent, making threats. They're holding him for extradition." Reynolds hesitated. "He had your address in his pocket and detailed notes about Zoe's school schedule." The words landed like physical blows. Marcus leaned against the wall, suddenly lightheaded. "He was planning to come after my daughter?" "It appears that way," Reynolds confirmed grimly. "But he never got the chance. Too drunk to execute whatever he had planned, and now he's in custody. The DA's adding stalking and attempted intimidation of a witness to the charges." Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by a wave of nausea. The threat had been real, not imagined. Whitfield had indeed planned some form of revenge, targeting not just Marcus but Zoe, an innocent child whose only crime was being her father's daughter. "She was never in real danger," Reynolds assured him, reading his expression. "We had officers at the school. Your house was being monitored. He wouldn't have gotten close." Marcus nodded mechanically, but the knowledge that Whitfield had been plotting against his daughter left him deeply shaken. The victory that had seemed so clear-cut suddenly felt hollow, tainted by how close they'd come to further trauma. That evening, Marcus held Zoe extra tight as they read bedtime stories, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, memorizing the weight of her small body against his. She was safe. They were safe. Yet the fragility of that safety had been exposed in ways he couldn't ignore. After Zoe fell asleep, Marcus sat alone in his living room, turning over a question that had haunted him since the beginning. Had it been worth it? The confrontation, the public scrutiny, the career risks, the personal danger, had standing up for principle justified all that followed? He thought of the Community Advisory Board at the hospital already implementing changes that would affect thousands of patients. He thought of the police department's new training protocols, developed with input from the communities they served. He thought of Karen Whitfield finding her voice, of Ella's courage in standing up for truth, of all the conversations happening in homes and schools and workplaces, because one incident had forced people to see what had always been there. Yes, he decided, it had been worth it. Not because his actions alone could fix centuries of systemic inequity, but because silence never could. Change required voices, many voices, speaking difficult truths, demanding better. His had been just one voice, amplified by circumstance and privilege, but it had joined a chorus that was growing louder every day. His phone buzzed with a text from Ayanna. "Whitfield in custody. Press conference tomorrow." This chapter is ending. The real work continues. Marcus smiled faintly at her characteristic blend of celebration and challenge. She was right, of course. Whitfield's capture wasn't an endpoint, but a comma in a much longer sentence. The systems that had empowered him, protected him, and nearly allowed him to destroy lives based on prejudice and self-interest, those remained. The work of dismantling them was just beginning. But tonight, in this moment, Marcus allowed himself to feel something he hadn't fully embraced since that afternoon in the park. Peace. His daughter was safe. Justice, however imperfect, was being served. And tomorrow, he would continue the work of healing. Bodies in the operating room and something larger, more complex outside it. 3 months after the day in the park, Marcus sat in a courthouse, listening as Richard Whitfield pleaded guilty to multiple charges: corruption, witness intimidation, misuse of public funds, and attempted stalking. The once powerful councilman seemed diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his shoulders hunched, his voice barely audible as he acknowledged his crimes. Karen sat several rows behind Marcus, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Ella wasn't present. Her mother had wisely decided to shield her from this public humiliation, though the teenager had been instrumental in bringing her father to justice. Their eyes met briefly as the judge announced Whitfield's sentence: 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. "It's over," Ayanna whispered, squeezing Marcus's arm gently. Really over this time. But was it? As they left the courthouse, navigating through the cluster of reporters, Marcus found himself reflecting on the concept of closure. Whitfield would serve his time. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. Yet the ripple effects of that afternoon in the park continued to spread, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen. At Mercy Hospital, the Community Advisory Board had already implemented significant changes, revised intake procedures that reduced disparities in treatment, cultural competency training for all staff, a scholarship program for minority students pursuing healthcare careers. Dr. Winters had been promoted to Chief Medical Officer, bringing her progressive vision to the entire institution. The police department, under increasing public scrutiny, had launched a comprehensive review of its practices. Officer Reynolds, once a solitary voice for reform, now headed a newly formed community relations unit. The officers involved in the park incident had undergone additional training. One had transferred to administrative duties, recognizing that patrol work wasn't aligned with his temperament or abilities, and Marcus himself had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The surgeon who had once guarded his privacy, who had structured his entire life around his work and his daughter, now found himself increasingly involved in community advocacy. He'd accepted speaking engagements, consulted on policy reforms, and even tentatively discussed the possibility of teaching at the medical school, sharing not just his surgical expertise but his lived experience. "Dr. Bennett," a woman's voice called out as he and Ayanna reached the courthouse steps. A reporter thrust a microphone toward him. "How do you feel about the sentence? Do you think justice was served?" Marcus paused, considering the question, with the thoughtfulness that had become his hallmark in public appearances. "Justice isn't a destination," he replied. "It's a process. Mr. Whitfield will serve his time, but the real measure of justice will be in how our community changes as a result of what we've learned through this experience." As the reporters clamored with follow-up questions, Karen approached hesitantly. "Marcus, do you have a moment?" They walked together to a quiet corner of the courthouse plaza, away from the press and the curious onlookers. "I keep thinking about how differently this could have ended," Karen said softly. "If you hadn't stood your ground, if Ella hadn't found her courage, if so many people hadn't chosen truth over comfort." She shook her head. "I sent you some terrible text messages when this all started, things I'm ashamed of now." "We've all said things we regret," Marcus replied. It's what we do afterward that matters. Karen nodded, then reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. Ella and I have been working on something. A foundation focused on education and awareness about racial profiling. We're using the divorce settlement to fund it. She handed him the envelope. We'd like you to be on the advisory board. Your perspective would be invaluable. Marcus was genuinely surprised. You're using your settlement money for this? It seemed fitting, Karen replied with a small smile. Richard's money going toward undoing the kind of harm he tried to perpetuate. She hesitated. I know it doesn't make up for what happened, what I did. Nothing can. But maybe it can prevent another family from going through what you and Zoe experienced. As Marcus drove home that afternoon, he found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them all to this point. A single moment of prejudice in a park had sparked a chain reaction that exposed corruption, challenged systems, rebuilt a family, and potentially created lasting change. The cost had been high: stress, fear, career jeopardy, but the outcome had exceeded anything he could have imagined when he'd first stood his ground with those officers. Zoe was waiting when he arrived home, eager to show him her latest school project, a colorful poster board titled Everyday Heroes, featuring hand-drawn pictures of various people making a difference in their community. In the center, unmistakably, was a figure labeled My Dad. Ms. Phillips said we should pick heroes who don't wear capes, Zoe explained proudly. I picked you because you help sick kids and you stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Marcus swallowed the sudden lump in his throat, kneeling to examine her work more closely. This is beautiful, Zozo. I put other heroes too, she continued, pointing out her drawings. Ms. Phillips, because she teaches us important stuff. Officer Reynolds, because he helps keep people safe the right way. Mrs. Karen, because she said sorry and really meant it. And Ella, because she was brave when her dad was being mean. The simplicity of her assessment, the clear-eyed way she had distilled complex events into fundamental truths about courage and integrity, moved Marcus deeply. Children saw through the noise to what mattered. They understood fairness instinctively, recognized courage when they saw it, and expected adults to live up to their own stated values. You know who else is a hero? Marcus asked, pulling her into a hug. You are. Because you stayed strong through all of this and you never stopped believing things could get better. That evening, as they sat on the back porch enjoying the last warmth of a late summer day, Marcus's phone rang with an unexpected call. It was Dr. Lawrence Patterson, the dean of the medical school associated with Mercy Hospital. Marcus, I'll get right to the point, Patterson said after brief pleasantries. We're establishing a new center focused on equity in healthcare, research, education, policy development. We need someone to lead it, someone with both medical expertise and lived experience, someone who's demonstrated courage under pressure and a commitment to meaningful change. Marcus was silent for a moment, processing the offer. I'm a surgeon, Lawrence. My place is in the operating room. You'll still operate, Patterson assured him. But your influence could extend far beyond one hospital, one operating room. Think about it, shaping the next generation of physicians, addressing systemic disparities, building something that outlasts all of us. It was a tempting vision. Yet Marcus hesitated, watching Zoe chase fireflies across the lawn. Can I give it some thought? Of course, Patterson replied, but don't think too long. We need to announce the appointment next month. After hanging up, Marcus sat quietly, turning the opportunity over in his mind. 3 months ago, he would have declined immediately, retreating to the safety of his surgical practice and his private life. Now, the possibility beckoned, a chance to channel everything he'd experienced, everything he'd learned, into lasting structural change. As if sensing his thoughts, Ayanna texted, Patterson called you, didn't he? Say yes. The world needs more than your surgical skills right now." Marcus smiled, shaking his head at her uncanny ability to anticipate events. She'd been pushing him to think bigger, to recognize that his voice carried weight that could be leveraged for broader impact. "Daddy, look!" Zoe called, running toward him with cupped hands. "I caught one!" She opened her palms carefully to reveal a firefly, its abdomen glowing with soft, intermittent light. "Beautiful," Marcus said, watching the tiny creature illuminate the darkness around it. "But remember, we have to let it go. It has important work to do out there." "I know," Zoe nodded solemnly, releasing the firefly and watching it rise into the gathering dusk, its light pulsing as it rejoined its brethren in the night sky. The metaphor wasn't lost on Marcus. He too had a light to share, knowledge and experience that could illuminate darker corners of their healthcare system. Perhaps Patterson's offer was the right vehicle for that work. The next morning, Marcus was surprised to find Pastor Turner waiting outside his office at the hospital. The community leader had been a steady presence throughout the Whitfield case, offering wisdom and perspective when tensions ran highest. "I hoped I might catch you before rounds," Turner explained. "I wanted to share some news." He handed Marcus a folder. "The community forum we held, it's grown into something bigger. We've established a formal coalition addressing racial profiling across the city. Law enforcement, community organizations, faith groups, healthcare providers, educators, all at the table together." Marcus flipped through the materials, impressed by the scope and organization of the initiative. "This is remarkable, Pastor." "And you helped catalyze it," Turner replied. "By refusing to let what happened to you be minimized or dismissed, you created space for hundreds of other voices to be heard." He paused meaningfully. "The coalition needs a healthcare representative, someone who understands both the system and its impacts." Marcus laughed softly. "You're the second person in 24 hours to recruit me for something bigger than surgery." "Perhaps that's the universe sending you a message," Turner suggested with a smile. "You've always been a healer, Marcus. Maybe it's time to think about healing more than individual patients." As the pastor left, Marcus found himself standing at a crossroads he hadn't anticipated when he'd first taken Zoe to the park that fateful afternoon. The path he'd planned, building his surgical practice, raising his daughter, keeping his head down, had been irrevocably altered. New possibilities stretched before him, challenging and uncertain, but filled with potential. In his office, he found a small package on his desk with a note from Nurse Martinez. "A patient's mother asked me to give you this." Inside was a simple wooden plaque engraved with words attributed to Desmond Tutu. "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." Marcus traced the words with his finger, thinking of all the times in his life he'd chosen neutrality for the sake of peace, advancement, or simply an easier path. The incident in the park had stripped that option away, forcing him to take a stand. And in doing so, he'd discovered a voice he hadn't known he possessed, a platform he hadn't sought, but could no longer in good conscience ignore. His phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "Ella's school invited me to speak about our foundation next week. Terrified but saying yes. Your courage is contagious, apparently." Marcus smiled at the message. Courage was contagious. So was hope. So was the belief that systems could change when enough people demanded it. Perhaps that was the most important lesson from all of this, that individual actions, multiplied across a community, could shift what once seemed immovable. By the time he began his rounds that morning, Marcus had made his decision. He would accept Patterson's offer. He would join Pastor Turner's coalition. He would serve on Karen and Ella's foundation board. He would step fully into this unexpected role as both surgeon and advocate, healer and voice for change. The path wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, setbacks, Days when it would seem easier to retreat to the operating room and leave the systems unchanged. But he had Zoe watching, learning from his example. He had a community that had stood behind him when it mattered most. And he had the knowledge that silence, however comfortable, was no longer an option he could live with. 1 year later, Marcus stood at the podium in Mercy Hospital's newly renovated auditorium, surveying the diverse audience before him. The Center for Equity in Healthcare was officially opening today, the culmination of months of planning, fundraising, and persistent advocacy. What had begun as a concept in Dean Patterson's mind had become a reality through the efforts of many, including Marcus, who had accepted the position as its inaugural director while maintaining a reduced surgical schedule. "A year ago," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed room, "I took my daughter to a park. It was an ordinary afternoon that became extraordinary not because of what I did, but because of what happened next. Not just to me, but through me, through all of us." The audience included familiar faces: Dr. Winters, Officer Reynolds, Pastor Turner, Ayanna, and many others who had been part of the journey. In the front row sat Karen and Ella Whitfield, their foundation now partnering with the Center on Community Education Initiatives. Behind them were community members, medical students, hospital staff, and local leaders, all drawn by the promise of what this center might accomplish. When we talk about equity in healthcare, we're not just discussing abstract concepts or statistics, Marcus continued. We're talking about human lives, human dignity, human potential. We're acknowledging that health doesn't exist in isolation from the social contexts that shape our lives, contexts that don't treat all of us equally. He gestured toward a wall where photographs displayed the center's initial projects: a mobile health unit serving under-resourced neighborhoods, a mentorship program for minority students interested in healthcare careers, a research initiative examining disparities in pediatric treatment outcomes. These projects represent just the beginning, Marcus explained, but they share a common philosophy that listening to communities must precede serving them, that lived experience is as valuable as clinical expertise, and that lasting change requires transforming systems, not just individual behaviors. As Marcus outlined the center's vision and goals, he found himself reflecting on the personal journey that had brought him to this moment. The pain and fear he'd experienced had gradually transformed into purpose, not erased or forgotten, but channeled into something constructive, something larger than himself. After the ceremony, as attendees mingled during the reception, Marcus found himself pulled into various conversations: medical students eager to join the center's initiatives, community organizers proposing partnerships, researchers sharing relevant studies. This new role demanded different skills than surgery, requiring him to build consensus, navigate institutional politics, and articulate a vision that others could embrace. "You look like you were born for this," Ayanna observed, handing him a glass of sparkling water. "Hard to believe you ever hesitated." "I still hesitate," Marcus admitted with a small smile. "Every time I step away from the operating room, I wonder if I'm making the right choice." "You're still saving lives," she pointed out, "just in a different way." Across the room, Marcus spotted Zoe chatting animatedly with Ella Whitfield. The unlikely friendship between his daughter and Karen's had been one of the more surprising developments of the past year. Despite their age difference, they had bonded through their shared experience of having their lives upended by forces beyond their control. At 8 years old, Zoe remained remarkably resilient. The incident at the park had affected her certainly, making her more aware of racial dynamics than most children her age, more sensitive to injustice, more questioning of authority. But it had also nurtured her innate compassion and strengthened her sense of agency. When her school experienced a bullying incident with racial overtones, it was Zoe who organized her classmates to speak up. "Your daughter is extraordinary," Karen said, joining Marcus and Ayanna. She was just telling Ella about her idea for a kids' advisory board for the center. That's the first I'm hearing of it, Marcus laughed. But it's a good idea. We should be including young voices in our planning. Karen smiled, her expression thoughtful. It's strange, isn't it? How things turn out so differently than we expect. She glanced around the room. A year ago, I was a politician's wife living in a bubble of privilege I didn't even recognize. Now I'm a divorced single mother running a nonprofit and partnering with the man whose life I nearly derailed. Life rarely follows a straight line, Marcus acknowledged. Richard called last week, Karen said softly. From prison. First time since the sentencing. She twisted the strap of her purse nervously. He wanted to talk to Ella. I said it was her choice. What did she decide? She's thinking about it, Karen replied. Part of me hopes she'll agree. Despite everything, he's still her father. She shook her head slightly. Forgiveness is complicated, isn't it? Not a single act, but a process. One day at a time, Marcus agreed, thinking of his own journey toward reconciling with what had happened. The anger still surfaced occasionally when he read about similar incidents in the news, when Zoe asked difficult questions he couldn't answer, when he encountered resistance to changes he knew were necessary. But it no longer consumed him. It had become fuel rather than fire. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the maintenance staff began cleaning up, Marcus found himself alone in the new center's main office. The space was still taking shape. Boxes of materials waited to be unpacked, bare walls needed artwork, empty bookshelves anticipated volumes of research. Like the work itself, the physical space was a work in progress. Officer Reynolds stopped by on his way out, lingering in the doorway. Quite a day, he observed. You've come a long way from that afternoon in the park. We all have, Marcus replied, gesturing for Reynolds to enter. The two men had developed an unlikely alliance over the past year, with Reynolds providing a crucial perspective from within law enforcement as the community coalition worked toward reforms. The department's implementing the new protocols next month, Reynolds reported, taking a seat across from Marcus. Body cameras for all officers, revised training on bias recognition, community service requirements during academy training. He smiled wryly. Not everything we wanted, but more than I thought possible a year ago. Progress rarely happens all at once, Marcus agreed. But these changes will make a difference. Reynolds nodded, then hesitated before continuing. I've been offered a promotion, leadership of the new Community Engagement Division, full departmental backing, budget, staff. That's excellent news, Marcus said sincerely. They couldn't choose a better person. I almost turned it down, Reynolds admitted. Thought I could do more good on the streets working directly with officers and communities. He shook his head. Then I realized I was making the same argument you must have made to yourself about staying solely in surgery. Marcus smiled in recognition. Sometimes our greatest impact comes from places we never planned to be. After Reynolds left, Marcus called Mrs. Rodriguez to check on Zoe. She was already asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day. He would work for another hour or so before heading home, reviewing applications for the center's first research fellowships. As he sorted through the candidates, he came across a letter of recommendation from Dr. Chen, supporting a young surgeon from an underrepresented background. The letter mentioned the candidate's interest in health disparities research, sparked by personal experiences with inequitable healthcare. Marcus stared at the letter, struck by how many threads had come together to create this moment, this center, these opportunities, this potential for change. A year ago, he had been focused solely on protecting his daughter from a world that might not see her humanity. Now he was working to change that world, not just for Zoe, but for countless others whose names he would never know. His phone buzzed with a text from Ayana. Turned on the news yet? City Council just unanimously passed the Community Oversight Board proposal. Your testimony last month made the difference. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction. The Oversight Board would create a formal mechanism for civilian review of police interactions, adding accountability to a system that had too often lacked it. It wouldn't prevent every incident like the one he'd experienced, but it would provide recourse when they occurred, and its very existence might deter some of the worst abuses of power. He texted back, "One step of many. Now the real work begins." Ayana's response came quickly. "Always does, but we're better positioned than ever. Get some rest, Director Bennett. Tomorrow's coming fast." As Marcus finally prepared to leave for the night, he paused at the window, looking out over the city lights spread below him. Somewhere out there, a version of his past self was perhaps taking his daughter to a park, unaware of the scrutiny that would follow, the assumptions that would be made based on nothing more than the color of his skin. But somewhere out there, too, was a Karen Whitfield choosing reflection over reaction, an Officer Reynolds intervening to de-escalate rather than intensify, a hospital board recognizing the value of diverse perspectives, a community willing to have difficult conversations about bias and fear and the systems that perpetuated both. Change happened slowly, unevenly, with setbacks and resistance, but it happened. Decision by decision, conversation by conversation, policy by policy. And sometimes it happened because one person refused to accept that the way things had always been was the way they always had to be. Marcus thought of Zoe's words from months earlier. You stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Children saw through the complexities to the essential truths. Standing up was hard. It came with costs, with risks, with pain. But the alternative, silence, acceptance, the perpetuation of injustice, carried greater costs, not just for individuals, but for the shared future they were all building together. The next morning, Marcus arrived early at the center, energized despite the long day ahead. A young medical student was waiting, nervous but determined, clutching a proposal for a community health education project. "Dr. Bennett," she began hesitantly, "I know you must be busy, but I was hoping to discuss—" "Come in," Marcus interrupted with a warm smile, opening the door to his office. "I'm never too busy to talk about new ideas." As they sat down to discuss her project, Marcus felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where he was meant to be, not just in an operating room saving one life at a time, but here, helping shape a generation of healthcare providers who would approach their work with both clinical excellence and deep humanity. One afternoon in a park had changed everything, not just for him, but for a community, an institution, a system that had needed changing for far too long. The story wasn't over, might never truly be over, but it had evolved from a moment of injustice into a movement for transformation. And in that evolution lay the most unbelievable outcome of all, the discovery that ordinary people, when they refused to accept the unacceptable, could create extraordinary change.